Hey, what's up, guys? Today I decided to start the show off to announce, look at me, I'm a little pony. Okay, this has gotten weird all long enough. Anyways, so let me just get rid of this. Yes, by the way, I did use some little app or something to make this. If I was a brony or a pony or something, whatever that little My Little Pony thing is, that's what I would probably most likely look like for an OC. But oh, what's this? This is the wonderful looking face that you ladies have been wanting to see. But if you're guys, I don't swing that way. Anyways, the point is, this is Ask Christian Anarchist number 45. Which means 5 more episodes of this until we reach the big 50, the big 50. And so far, we're having a great time. I'm trying to keep myself awake to answer y'all's questions as I sip on some orange soda. Trying to be all fancy and French-like. And, hold on a sec. We got someone saying, okay, Deconverted Bam wants to get in. Okay, I'll email you the link there. And then another one, Scarlett, wants to come in through the Hangouts, and we will do so. Just give me a second to get the Deconverted Man real quick, because he's been wanting to get in. But while I'm doing that, I want to just first of all introduce everyone. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on, or watching, or whichever you decide to do. So before we begin, rather you're watching through Twitter, rather you're watching through any other means, here's how it goes. So if you want to do Ask Christian Anarchist, there's 4 ways you can interact. The first one being is you can come in here. It's not too hard to do. All you got to do, and I don't know why I'm starting to go British all of a sudden, you just ask me on Google Hangouts for the link, and hey, you can come in here. But that way I can check out whether or not to see if you are actually legit. Hang on a second, make sure I got this right. Nope, I only covered part of the thing. I got E-converted man, not deconverted man. All right, there we go. Link, and then I'll get this. But yeah, so that's one way. You have the live chat. You can submit your question in the live chat, and I'll be sure to answer as best as I can. Then, of course, you also have your great. Trying to talk, think. Oh yeah, you have 2 other ways. For those of you who are watching on Twitter, or those who have a Twitter, you can submit a question via there. Just make sure you use the hashtag AskCA, and I will get to your question. Someone actually said they were going to try that, so let me see if someone actually did. Nope. Still haven't had any questions from Twitter using that hashtag. Hopefully one day we can get it. Let's see here. All right. But yeah, hopefully D got the link because it's been sent. Yeah, and then of course you have Discord. So for those of you who have a Discord, you can go in there, go to the show questions only, and bada bing, bada boom, you got it there. You can just submit your questions in the category under show questions only, and we'll get to it. In fact, we got a couple there, and there's one that is wanting to be answered tonight. So this will also give us some time to get a couple people in. So actually, let me get to Stella real quick. Trying to make sure to jumble through everything today. All right. All right. Actually, hold on a second. Let me. Oh, we got D converted in here. Let me blow my nose real quick. All right. Welcome, D.
D. Converted man here.
There you go. Oh,
wait, I'll do it for you. Okay. Christian Anarchist over there.
Hey, that's the name.
For whatever reason, my brain wanted to read Christian Antichrist, and I'm like, well,
you're not the first.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'm like, well, wait, maybe actually it does.
I've been called an antichrist before by a couple of people, Rand Campbell being one of them.
Well, let me toy with your mind a bit on anarchy. I don't know if you had a specific topic in mind for this or anything.
Well, this is just an Ask Christian Anarchist. This is a Q&A for Bible questions or any random topics some people like to ask about my voice acting, or any other kinds of questions that they may have. So it's pretty much like a free-for-all type of Q&A kind of thing, D.
All right, well, I'll talk anarchy because the few times I've ever encountered it or had anyone try to explain it, it never really made a lot of sense because you start asking like, okay, well, how would we have a police or a firefighters or things like this that are supported by a system of government if we had no government? So it's like, well, you have no government, but you kind of have a government, and then it's like, well, then it's not anarchy. So what is that? So
Yeah.
what is anarchy? Is it literally chaos, or
It's pretty much like you have a bit of chaos and disorder, but that's leading to mostly the agenda is a no authority kind of thing. It's pretty much an anti-authoritative kind of thing, and that's why you have groups like Antifa being closely identifying as an anarchistic kind of group, even though people that I do identify as aren't anarchists, like Noam Chomsky, have kind of like put them as something else. I forgot exactly what he called them, but he said anything but anarchist at this point. But yeah, it's just anti-authority, and what I find about it also is contradictory because the way they try to go about it. Funny story is some group of anarchists tried to recruit me into their YouTube Operation Anarchy or something is what it was called. And I said, well, I'm not an actual anarchist. And the name is just more of like a play on words kind of thing. It's based on, people claiming I just come into a hangout to cause chaos and disorder, try to be a heretic. And some Christians say that, some atheists say, well, you're just trying to cause unreasonable discourse. And like, okay, well, that's the way you go.
Okay, so you're not, if I'm correct, then you're not a political anarchist then? Or
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not a political anarchist.
Oh, okay, because that's what I was asking about with the anarchy. I thought,
but the guy. Well, once I told it to the guy, he's like, "Okay, I demand you take anarchist out of your name and replace it with something else." And I'm like, "Well,
no,
look who's acting like the authority here."
Right? Yeah, exactly. Well, wouldn't it be? I mean, it would be kind of a paradox that you were an anarchist in the sense of the word. And a Christian, because you definitely have a master as a Christian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's why I definitely say it's impossible for a person to fully be a Christian anarchist if we're going by the literal term, because you have a master, you can't go against his authority.
It's more like I'm calling myself that because I cause anarchy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a joke sort of a name.
Right. It's kind of that. It's basically just because of like the accusations I've gotten from Christians and atheists alike that I do nothing but seek or cause chaos and discord whenever I come into a hangout.
I see. But also then your initials, because people will call me DM sometimes or whatever, and so we call you CA, we think you're from California. So are you from California?
No, I'm from the Bible Belt South.
So that just adds to the question marks. Is your hair even black? Do you even wear glasses in real life? What's going on? Like your avatar is like the opposite of you for real. It's like no one knows anything.
Oh yeah, if you go to my Twitter page, it pretty much has like an anime version of this character and a more anime drawing of what I really look like on this. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to get some more drawings done of me. I'll probably have to commission them or whatever, so I can throw more stuff in my videos. Because, I mean, the thing is, like, just filming myself talk people don't like. I could do it in a way where where the sound would be good, but since I don't have anything like behind me, like most people that do that have stuff behind them all the time, like a certain, you've seen the big YouTubers that do this sort of stuff. You know what I'm talking about? Some of them are just, I mean, they are a set. It's not even a room. It's a set that's behind them. Like, was that Mythical Morning? Like, they're in a room, but it's not really even a room.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not gonna change my style to try to get big, but there's certain things I want to spruce up a little bit just because, make me feel better. But I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with like trying to get people to subscribe and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, whatever. I'll just make what I want to make. Screw it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So, what else do you say besides anarchy? The Christian thing. I guess we could disagree on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
we're just trying to make sure to limit to at least one question per the thing because we got to try to get to other people on here.
Is anyone saying anything? I'm looking at the chat.
Well, we got people that would come in here. We got 2 others. Then we got Twitter, Discord, as well as the YouTube live chat.
Oh, okay. I didn't even notice there was more people in here. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it must be the lobster covering your eyes.
Yeah, it was. Well, I was looking at the outside chat, so. So what do they have to say? We have a Goku, we have a vampire.
Yes, we have Calvinist Goku, and then we have the
Calvinist Goku.
Oh yeah, you should see his tweets. It's the Kamehameha tulip, I think, is one thing, and he just like has a bunch of verses on it. I don't know if he makes his own or if he just grabs them from some friend of his. They're pretty interesting to me.
What religion is Piccolo? Mr. Boo would be like what, Buddha, I guess.
There you go.
He's really
yeah. But all right, so I did say it.
Go ahead.
Is that Scarlett?
Yeah, I'm here. I've just a little shit from earlier. Sorry about yelling at you in Discord.
That's good.
I just don't know what to do about me and Bobby anymore.
All right,
like,
so can you tell me about what?
I asked God so many times to not let us drift, and he just goes against it. Like, me and Bobby are drifting so fucking much right now. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know if I stay with him or if I just let him go, but I can't.
All right, okay, calm down. So what's the problem that's going on that's causing y'all to drift apart? Is there a fight that's going on with y'all?
Me and him are just at each other's throats so much lately. I don't know why. I don't know why we're at each other's throat. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know if I should keep asking God about it or just say fuck it and not do anything anymore.
Let's see. Well, definitely I've seen in high school where I've had a couple of friends that have gone through this. One guy that I was trying to start a band with back then had gotten into a couple of fights and disagreements with his girlfriend and wasn't going too well between them. But they ended up being happy. But the only thing is that they decided that they could only be that happy as friends. They figured with them being together as a boyfriend and girlfriend definitely put an emphasis on some drama that had happened. And with the pressures that comes with it, definitely can cause irritation and definitely causing one to go at each other's throats, especially if you're very close, trust somebody too much, and then definitely gets into fights that can be very unhealthy if it's not a well-balanced thing. Because sometimes some couples need a few fights. It's what sometimes strengthens the bond in the relationship. I've known this because my folks themselves, my parents, have gone through some of these things, but they're still together till this very day. And I know my grandparents have gone through this, and Sunday, I'm going.
Hold on.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Sorry,
But
I'm
as I
getting
was,
cold at the
all right,
same time right now, so I had to go on mute to cough.
all right, that's cool. But as a this Sunday, I'm going to my Nana and Gramps, my grand folks. They've had some fights, and this Sunday is their 60th wedding anniversary. They've been together for 60 whole years,
Jeez.
and and I've even seen them to this very day argue as old people. But the one thing that I've noticed is that it has to be a balance. If it's something where you feel it's going to be a little unhealthy and it's tearing you apart, the best thing to do is, I don't know if you guys were friends back then. Were y'all friends before y'all became boyfriend and girlfriend, like very close to each other?
Yeah, but he lives in another state, but me and him talked a lot on Discord before we were boyfriend and girlfriend, so I guess you
Okay.
could say we were really good friends.
hmm So that's what I would suggest, is that if things aren't working out as a couple, the best thing to do that I've learned from my friends that I hang out with in high school is that it's either take a break, which sometimes they end up just taking a break from a bit and then they come back together, or just break it off and remember that some of the best times that y'all can have was definitely when y'all were friends, and not to let um, the bad times when couples happen outweigh the times that you had as friends, because sometimes that's what I've heard from especially my friends at school, is that they felt like they could have a lot more laughs and have a lot more fun uh, being around each other if they were just friends, instead of comparing to being like a couple. They couldn't really explain why that feeling was, but that's just the experience that I've seen and what they've told me about. So that would be my suggestion. But again, it's just a suggestion. You can take it or leave it.
Okay. I've got a funny story to tell right now. So my mom, and it's basically about boyfriend and girlfriend. My mom, when she was younger, had a dream about her friends going on a date. Exact details of what they were wearing and everything. And in the dream, she said that they had a fight. The next day, she found her friend crying. She goes, "What happened?" He goes, "Oh, me and so were on a date last night. I was wearing this, he was wearing that. We had this and that, and we had a fight and broke up." My mom's like, "Oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry. I dreamt of that." It goes, "You can't dream of something like that and it actually happened. It must have just been a coincidence." But that's kind of funny how that happened. How like she knew the exact details of everything. Don't you think that's kind of weird, Christian? How she was able to do that? That's
Mhm.
kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, that I definitely think that sometimes dreams definitely, it's very rare when it happens, but definitely you find it strange when dreams have that kind of connection and such.
Reality.
hmm Yeah,
But hey, I'm gonna head off and thanks again, Christian. I'll talk to you later.
no problem. Shalom.
Hey, and Decon, it's not Vampire Girl.
Sorry.
I'm not Vampire Girl.
you had the kind of vampire.
Yeah, back when I made this account, I had a very vampiric stage on me. I've never changed that picture since. I just thought I'd playfully gripe at you about that. I hope we can become friends in the future.
Yeah. I hope that things work out. I would say what I learned in anger management when I had to take that sometime during my failing marriage that's now failed and gone. But the one thing I learned was you cannot change anyone else. And although that's like, well, yeah, everyone knows that, but it's like you really have to accept that this is true, because you'll find yourself trying to change somebody else and it will drive you up the wall. You can't do it. You can only change yourself, and only to some limited degree, because there's certain things about ourselves we might not be able to change without hurting our own brain or something. But that was really a big thing to understand and accept that, because there's only like three things you can do when things aren't working out. You can accept them for who they are, flaws and all, change yourself to accommodate them, or leave. And those are the only real options, because they might change on their own, but they have to do that. You can't tell them to, you can't suggest it, you can't make them. That's just not how that functions. So hopefully that will be of some help.
All right, thanks, guys. I'm gonna head off now.
No problemo.
Because my mom just yelled for me too.
Yeah, best take care of that one. All right, thanks for coming on.
Bye, Christian.
Bye, Scarlett. All right, so thank you for the question there, Scarlett. I tried to get to this one. I promised him I was going to get to him first, and we're going to get to him. We have Aleximus Prime, who asked his question via Discord, and it is, okay. I think that it's important for Christians, or at least people who don't follow the Hollywood way, to try harder at getting involved with the entertainment industry, acting, singing, filmmaking in general. There is barely any Christian presence in Hollywood, and I think that so many years of Orthodox Christians telling their youth that the media is bad for us, it's driven us away from being more involved with it, and that might be part of the reason why the media is so corrupt and godless. Do you agree? In a sense, I do, because what I normally see is that at times we have people like, you know, especially if, like you say, you have like, what is it? Hannity or certain other groups. They all, the one thing that they definitely need is a religious expert on certain topics. And sometimes these are just people that have gotten involved into, it's very rare that you have someone supposedly coming from these different stations like Fox or MSNBC. And when they do, they're usually just like very watered down kind of people. Excuse me for a second. Ah, dang it. They converted me and had to go, but oh well, at least he got to ask part of a question. Who knows? He might come back soon. Anyway, so yeah. But for example, like whenever an Islamic thing comes on, they call upon Reza Aslan, who, concerning Islam, would not be much of a good representative of such, since he's more of a spiritualist type of person that I think that even the Muslims that are in the majority of, at least the Sunni perspective, would definitely have a problem with. And that consists of the majority of the Islamic population, even of the peace-loving types. That being said, so Christians, for example, you have mostly like the Catholics in the things like Kennedy and Bill O'Reilly, and people are like, yeah, go for these guys, but at the same time, they seem to be just your Catholic type of person that just wants to focus on, and they say some weird stuff too. I remember that who was it? Bill O'Reilly was basically trying to say, like, Christianity is not a religion; it is a philosophy. It's not a religion, because the whole thing was trying to pass it off as, you know, when some guy was saying that religion should not have its public place in the domain. It's like, oh, but philosophy can have its public place in the domain, and that's all Christianity is. It's only a philosophy. And to me, I find that kind of disingenuous. And the same thing then can go for people where it reaches to some of the movies, such as what we've had in the Noah movie, the Exodus movie. I mean, we have a lot of crazy stuff going on there. And there used to be a time where there was actually some decent godly people there. I mean, Charlton Heston, for example. But what I think we need, really, is, yeah, we need some more Christians involved in it, to not be scared of what some of the extremists are saying. And they're basically saying, oh, well, you know what? You need to stay away because there's porn in the industry. You need to stay away because there's lots of godless propaganda in it. That's a very broad brush you want to be painting with. In fact, let's go to this. So, First Corinthians, and I can't remember if we're going to start in chapter 8 or chapter 10. So have either one of those on this ready, because that's where we will be turning. If you will have a Bible with you, I'm going to be using my software, of course. So here we go. Yeah, chapter 8. So turn to chapter 8, or you use your software. You have a Bible Gateway or whatever. But I use my Bible software. All right. So right here, we have here that so starting in verse 1, Paul is writing to the church of Corinth, and one of the issues is about the eating of things that have been offered to idols, which is an issue because some people are saying, you must not eat these things that have been offered to idols, But what does Paul say? As someone who is inspired by God with the Holy Scriptures, he says, now as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. And if any man think that he knoweth anything, he knoweth nothing yet as he ought to know. But if any man love God, the same is known of him. So the key word, before he goes off into his lecture, but if any man love God, the same is known of him. Key word is about loving God. So, as concerning the eating of those things that are offered in sacrifice to idols, we know that an idol is nothing in the world, and that there is none other God but one. For though there be that are called gods, whether in heaven or in earth, as there be gods many and lords many, but to us there is but one God, the Father of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom all things, and we by him. Howbeit there is not in every man that knowledge, for some with consciousness of the idol unto this hour eat it as a thing offered unto an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. So we have right here in that a particular phrase that the idol means nothing. So just because it's been offered to an idol doesn't mean that taints the practice of eating the meat. Then we have meat commendeth us not to God, which in the Holman Christian Standard Bible will say, food will not make us acceptable to God if we don't eat, and we are not better if we do eat. So there we go. Then, but take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours becomes a stumbling block to them that are weak. For if any man seeth that which has knowledge sit at meat in the idol's temple, shall not the conscience of him which is weak be emboldened to eat those things which are offered to idols? So let me just explain what I'm trying to get at with the point here. That is that with the same thing with going on with the idols and the meats, just because an idol and a pagan practice had been affiliated, don't simply let your own decision be made based upon, the peer pressure of what others are saying. Go by what the conviction of the Holy Spirit leads you to, and at least recognize that you give God the thanks. For example, in the food place, and 1 Corinthians 10 also goes on to it, Paul talks about we know that there's only one God, and he is who we give thanks to the food for. Whenever we pray for our food, say grace, we recognize that the food has been made by other people, but it is ultimately only able to be in your possession because of God. So likewise, for the entertainment purposes, it's a general broad brush, and you can come out into this whole thing, into the news media as a Christian, and be an actor, do all this stuff. We have people that are currently doing this. We've had what's his name, Vic Mignogna, anime voice actor, done some popular work that people think about, especially Full Metal Alchemist. And yet with that, he's a Christian and very devout in his faith. Then I forget what this guy's name is. I remember Alex told me about him, and I actually followed him. I just forgot what the name was. Let me actually check, because I know he made a picture in reference to it. Oh yes, guy by the name of Gabriel Brown, otherwise known on some circles as well as especially Twitter, as Black Griffin. Apparently found out he's a Christian. And, you know, so there are people that are making some influences, but it's only a small portion at this point. So I think that, yeah, if you want to make an impact, definitely, if you want to join the industry, then definitely do so, because there's nothing that really condemns you. The only thing that would be condemning is if you go and you let their practice and let the culture shape and dictate how your life goes compared to, and your values compared to the biblical worldview that you hold to. You could still have fun, and like I go to conventions and chill and have a good laugh and play games and go to the panels and watch anime and read manga at these conventions. But I'm still holding to a biblical worldview in the meantime, and I'm being careful in what I watch and what I observe. But there are still some good things out there. Just because there's a few bad apples on a tree, that doesn't mean the whole entire thing is going to be completely contaminated at this point. It means there's still other good fruit that's going to be on that tree before it goes away. Man, chugging down orange soda. Anyways, that being said, thank you, Alex, for your question. If you got any more, feel free to send them in on Discord or in live chat, because I happen to see that you're in there. All right. Oh, wait, hold on. Is Goku, you there?
I'm here.
Welcome aboard, mate. Do you have a question?
I asked in the hashtag. I often see people misuse the verse in John 16, 3 or 8. I forget which one, where it says the Holy Spirit will lead you into all truth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, like especially with the people who believe in like entire sanctification, or what we call sinless perfectionism. They believe that every bit of their theology is 100% right because the Holy Spirit has led them into all the truth. And I just figured maybe you want to clarify what that verse actually means.
Okay, so let's go over that then. What's the verse?
I think it's John 16, 13.
All right, let's see, 13. All right. Let's try to make the, okay, so since you were going to try to make something a little more clear, let's try a more version that might be a little more clear to some people. So let's use ESV, just for some people out there, because I know that probably earlier I must have confused some people with using the ESV, but it's just something I prefer. Okay, so let's go here. John chapter 16, and we're going to start in verse 4. But I have said these things to you, that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told them to you. I did not say these things to you from the beginning because I was with you. But now I'm going to him who sent me, and none of you asks me, where are you going? But because I have said these things to you, sorrow has filled your heart. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. When he comes, he will convict the world concerning sin and unrighteousness, and righteousness, and judgment. Concerning sin, because they do not believe in me. Concerning righteousness, because I go to the Father, and you will see me no longer. Concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth, for he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. He will glorify me, for he will take what is mine and declare it to you. All that the Father has is mine. Therefore, I said that he will take what is mine, and I declare it unto you. All right. So, right there, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you unto all truth. For he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will declare to you things that are to come. All right. So again, so what are you saying some of the people are saying with this verse that you've heard? Goku, you there? All right. I think we may have had a pause there from him. All right. So, oh, there you are.
Wi-Fi ran away from me for a second.
But yeah, what were you saying? Some people are interpreting this as
that the Holy Spirit leads them into all truth. So they believe that everything that they believe concerning the Bible, whether it's eschatology or their views on sanctification, is the correct view. And if you don't believe it, then you're obviously not saved because you weren't led into all truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. So here's the thing. He's specifically referring to a specific event and a specific group of people. So this isn't just some general prescription. We have to keep in mind the context that's being laid out. Though we can get some principles, that interpretation that it's referring to them specifically in all kinds of instances is wrong. Because Jesus is basically saying that there's going to be a point where he's going to have to leave this earth. And then he will send a helper to comfort them, to guide them. And this is the Spirit of truth, as mentioned. This would be the Holy Spirit. This person of the Trinity will guide them to truth. Who is the them? Who is the you? Well, Jesus is obviously speaking in this passage, in this context, when he says that he's leaving. He's talking to his apostles. And the moment they said that would come true, and the guiding of all truth would be on the day of Pentecost when the Holy Spirit takes over them. So that is what's being referred to in this passage. And this is basically showing New Testament prophecy being fulfilled in New Testament. That Jesus' words were that these people would be comforted and receive the Spirit of truth that will guide them, because that they need someone to still guide them, and the Holy Spirit will do that. But while we can have the Holy Spirit, the purpose in which Jesus is referring to here is not the exact same thing as what's going to be addressed to the apostles, because the apostles had to continue teaching the teachings of Jesus through an inspired type of thing, and that they had to, go about, evangelize, and keep the faith strong. So with that, when it comes to us, we have the Spirit, but we still have to try our best to discern over things. We're not an apostle in the same way the 12 apostles were, or Paul, or any of them. We're not sinless like Jesus. We can have flaws and imperfections, and we pray our best to make sure that humbly we can get to the right truth. Now, for those who want to say, well, I have the Spirit on my side, well, then here comes another guy. I have the Spirit on my side. Here comes another guy. I have the Spirit on my side. There's three guys saying that the Spirit of truth leads to their theology being correct. One is Pentecostal, one of them being Isaac Newton, and his whole thing of saying that the Unitarian God revealed to me in such a way that I only know he can exist, and everyone else knows the Unitarian God exists, kind of perspective. And then you have Arians that are saying, that this God exists, and that he's led me to the Spirit of this truth. So you have these people making claims. How can we test them? Well, the Bible says, test the spirits to see if they are of God. And that ultimately should be it. You don't just simply say, well, I have the Spirit. Well, test that Spirit. See if it's actually telling the truth, if it's consistent with the Scripture. Well, and if it's not consistent with the Scriptures overall, I'd say, don't take these people seriously. So that's all. That's all I have to say about that.
That's usually what I try to get at, that, the immediate context shows that he's talking to the apostles. And then usually, I try to pull up a study Bible note or something. I usually go to the Reformation Study Bible, and it says, this refers to the truth about God, not temporal knowledge of every kind. The Spirit guided the New Testament writers who prepared the new written revelation that would take its place beside the Old Testament scriptures. The Spirit would remind the writers of the past, the Gospels, interpret the Gospel for the present, Acts and epistles, and reveal the things to come, such as Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish I tell them, you're kind of misapplying that, because Jesus was talking to specific people, and the Holy Spirit was going to guide them into things. And it also gives like a reference to, oh, here comes the train. I'm going to have to hit mute for a minute.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I get what you're saying there, man. Yeah, definitely. So, I almost forgot about pills here. So, yeah, thank you for your question there, man. We got a Soma guy that submitted a question earlier. So let's get to him, because he said he wanted to have that. Okay, so Soma Cruz asks, okay, he wants to post this out, but let me get through this intro. All right, question. Are historical and or scientific arguments efficient enough to say the evidence points to Christianity? That's an interesting one. If so, could you name a couple examples? Sorry, drinking water to down my medicine at this point. Okay. And a slight follow-up question. Why do you think the evidence for things like the Exodus and 40 years in the wilderness seem to only be spoken about by the Old Testament, leaving out those further removed from that time, speaking about the writings of the Old Testament account, commentary on it, of course. Thank you for your time. Okay. So I think I'm trying to understand this follow-up. Why do you think the evidence for things like the Exodus, 40s in the wilderness seems to be only spoken about? I think there's more evidence than just simply that, though. I mean, but okay, let's deal with this one by one. All right, so are historical or scientific arguments efficient enough to say the evidence points to Christianity? I think historical evidence certainly seems to indicate such. Scientific evidence, however, seems to lead to a different thing, because definitely you have to focus on what exactly you mean by scientific evidence. Oh, there's hey, Lord, I'm losing it already on my systems, burping like crazy. But yeah, like there are certain things like we can agree that in certain things of science, a Christian and a Muslim or a deist or any other kind of religious theistic type of group will look and say, yeah, we agree there's some sort of design or creator kind of thing. But that doesn't give you too much into the details. So then you have to look. Well, is the creation accounts in these texts, which one's more consistent with reality? And that's what we have to focus on. Now, for the Bible, there's not much you can do with that kind of thing on science, because what you see in some things like the cosmology of the world, the ancient Israelites did have a ancient Near Eastern cosmology in which they viewed the earth as flat with a dome over it. But just because that automatically is there doesn't mean that, well, then there's no scientific matching kinds of things in general. I mean, for example, when it comes to the issue about whether or not there's evolution, for example, I think there's a interesting case, and I've made this before in my debate with G-Man on the issue of whether or not a Christian can believe in evolution. Going to the software here, going down, I'm going to just use the King James just because, again, it's one of my favorites. And so starting here in verse 11, God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. Verse 12, it says, and the earth brought forth the grass and herb yielding seed. So God still gets the glory as the creator of these things. But we see here that God is saying, let the earth bring forth these things, using a divine command, so that the things of these things appearing natural is nothing more than a supernatural event in itself, because these things would not be able to start growing or doing their own thing and bringing forth and reproducing if it weren't for God. The fact that God's allowing the earth to bring forth these things and that they're growing and providing off of the land, it's a divine miracle in and of itself. But does it stop with plants? And again, this is just my argument. Then it says, God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that has life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And so one of the things that I found interesting from a friend of mine who did a commentary on Ephesians, in which he goes to an early church father quote, is that one of the early church fathers within, I think it was 3rd or 4th century, had looked at this passage and made the connection that because of, you see the waters bringing forth the moving creature and the fowl, this is in reference to birds, this guy, before evolution was even being taught, made the connection that he believed that because this verse has these creatures in order, he believes this is referring specifically to some kind of amphibian to a bird, or type of or reptile to bird type of evolution concept. And he got that just specifically from reading this text, is that why is it that moving creatures and such that are in the waters and such are made in the same place with the birds? And he kind of pulls that kind of connection together. So again, but my point with this is simply that it's still the waters bringing forth these things, and it's letting the waters bring forth the creatures in the natural state. Then verse 24, God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind. So the point is that God is allowing the earth to bring forth these things, but it's still, as it says in verse 25 and the other passages, still God is attributed as the creator in these circumstances. So it's not very hard to see that, for some people like us, we could still make some parallels within the text. So, that being said, that's just for that. And to quickly get, because we're getting more people joining, to answer the latter part of the question about the Exodus and the 40-year wilderness. See, I don't think it's just only in the Old Testament. Like, there's a good movie that came out on Netflix. For some of those who have Netflix, you might want to check this out. There's a movie that's called Patterns of Evidence, Exodus. And it's basically a guy who starts off trying to, prove the Exodus. And he gets disappointed at first because he finds, it seems as if there's literally no historical evidence to suggest that there was an Exodus. But then he's seeing these other different types of evidences and theories postulated, and it's basically about this time lapse. Which time area seems to be more consistent? Because if you go away from the traditional time span that people have calculated and go to another, there seems to be a lot more compelling connections, so-called coincidences, and others in these areas. It's like, you can't ignore this. And they even had a agnostic atheist, Dave Roll, arguing that the Exodus exists apart from simply just the Old Testament text, that we can find that if we read it and then try to find these other things, we see they match up perfectly well together. So there are very good things that I found in that particular movie. And I think the same thing could be found with any other kinds of things for the 40-year wilderness wandering. Yeah, so thank you for your time there, mate. Hope if you had any more questions, feel free to submit them in the Discord or the live chat, and we'll get to you. Okay, we have Pin Valentine saying, I 100% disagree with the idea that Christianity promotes critical thinking. 1 Corinthians 3:18. Let's go to that. So 1 Corinthians, because there's a verse I want to go through with that one then. 1 Corinthians 3:18. Let no man deceive himself. If any among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise. Okay, so just quoting one passage without understanding why he's specifically saying this, when this is part of a epistle and a letter that he's addressing to a specific group of people, and he doesn't repeat this type of message anywhere else. Why specifically say this? Well, again, and I'll even put it in the other part of the translation, so that way it can hopefully be a little more easy to understand. Come on now, don't be like this with the commentaries. Having to sort through stuff here. So right here, the passage that no one should deceive himself. If anyone among you thinks he is wise in this age, he must become foolish so that he become wise. All right. So first of all, verse 16. Don't you yourselves know that you are God's sanctuary and that in the Spirit of God lives in you? If anyone destroys God's sanctuary, God will destroy him. For God's sanctuary is holy, and that is what you are. Okay, so what's going on here? He's talking about the role of God's servant. So you being a Christian, or you need to treat yourselves carefully and avoid being immature. Saying, brothers, I was not able to speak to you as spiritual people, but as people of the flesh, as babies in Christ. I gave you milk to drink, not solid food, because you were not ready for it. In fact, you are still not ready. He's referring specifically to the people that you are still not ready. Who is still not ready? The people over at Corinth, because they're having problems. And that's why he said, gave milk to drink, the basic kind of stuff, not the big, deep theological kind of questions. And that's why he's saying, in fact, you're still not ready to go up to solid foods. You're still having to need the milk because you're not even maturing at this point. So that being said, so let's go on to the verse 18 and go onward till the end of the chapter, where it says, no one in age, he must become foolish, so he become wise, for the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God, since it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, the Lord knows that the reasonings of the wise are meaningless. So no one should boast in human leaders, for everything is yours. Whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or things present or things to come, everything is yours, and you belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God. So the whole context here is, do not simply put trust alone in human leaders or human authorities, because when you have people, as he even says, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas, he even puts himself on this, like, don't just listen to what I say. No. He basically says that you have to have some kind of spiritual authority as well, not just simply relying on the wisdom of other people, but the wisdom of God, which can be founded in the scriptures. And again, what do the scriptures tell us regarding the issues about wisdom and such? They tell us to test all spirits. So they tell us, hey, don't just believe what you hear, test them. And there was a verse that I believe General actually has pointed out, is that not only what got him to, critically examine things as a Christian, but also from what he told me, is that this was actually the verse that early people during when they were developing the scientific method, this is the inspiration verse, the verse that inspired the scientific method. Prove all things. Hold fast that which is good. Now, while the context is about the issues of prophecy and testing the spirits, the people that are prophesying and such, to prove all things, hold fast that which is good, this context is still there. If you're going to make something or believe in something, prove it. Because these people are saying that prophesying, these are things they believe. Well, prove all things. hold fast to that which is good. So right here, we have the Bible saying, hey, be a critical thinker. It's not saying, oh, well, don't just take everything by blind faith. No, it's not a blind faith kind of concept. It's allowing you to test all things, because if you're going to believe it, you have to, as First Thessalonians says, prove all things. All right. And apparently, as I was looking at the screen on my software, he's been trying to send me a link, ask for the link. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so Goku says, think Netflix removed patterns of evidence. Dang it. Well, I guess that happens.
Hey, Christian.
Mhm.
Just a quick link. I have good news. I did what Deconstruct said about talking to Shadow, and the good news is that we're just gonna leave each other alone for a few days, but we're not breaking up. So
All right.
I thought I'd tell you that y'all helped me a lot, and that I'm very thankful that y'all helped me basically set things right with Shadow. I appreciate it so much, Christian.
No problem. Just keep us updated on how things are going with y'all, okay?
I will. Talk to you later. I thought I'd pop in right past and say thank you for it.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, and we got Pin Valentine, who has just joined us. By the way, for some of y'all who's still watching, we have about an hour left before we end the show and go to the Discord for the after party. So if y'all still want to head on over for that and get ready, feel free to do so. But I don't think we have any other people that... actually, there was... Undead had asked something earlier, if I can find it. But Pin, did you want to talk about something?
Do you want to get to anyone before me? Because I won't just ask and let it lie.
Okay, understandable. Okay, so I just found it. Okay, Undead asks, hey, CA, what is your opinion on Christians celebrating Halloween and eating the trick-or-treat candy? I don't think people offer them to their gods, but still. Well, personally, the one thing I like about Halloween is the fact that it's also Reformation Day. That's one of the things I just enjoy about it. But no, in all seriousness, you being a Christian, going around celebrating Halloween, I mean, you're not believing you're an actual witch. You're not believing that, you're dressed up as a dead person that has already died and you're offering some kind of spiritual sacrifice or any type of thing of that. No. I mean, if you're there, you're just going out, you're getting candy, you're having fun. There's really nothing wrong with that. In the same way as, just looking at something hilarious on the TV and you're having a laugh about that. Oh, because it's funny. You got to stop enjoying it. If it's fun, you got to stop enjoying it. As long as you're not doing anything too crazy like cult sacrifices on Halloween or serial killing or dressing up as a clown to go do that weird clown trend that's been, I hope has been dying out lately, then as long as you ain't doing any of that kind of crazy mumbo jumbo, you're fine. All right. So, anyways, thank you for the question.
Amen.
There, Undead. CC. Amen. All right. Guess we got one more person, then we're going to get to the long one. I know it'd definitely be a little long. Hunter, did you have a question? Earth to Hunter. And he must be AFK. All right, then we'll get back to him in a few. But again, if y'all have questions, submit them via Twitter. In fact, let me try to check see if anyone has used the hashtag. And not a single person has. So we'll see where that goes. Anyways. Great. I just realized I forgot to invite the one person that I know on here. Sister, hipster. Dang it, I am an idiot. Well, anyways, yeah, so let's just go ahead and get to Pin. So, Pin, how are you doing?
Oh, I got a new job and whatnot. Who cares?
Well, glad to hear that. So I care.
So, I'm a little confused about your interpretation of 1 Corinthians chapter 3.
All right, what's there to be confused?
Where in Corinthians chapter 3 does it say to think critically?
I'm not saying that that particular thing does. I'm saying that there are passages where do inspire the critical thinking, and in the context of which Paul is addressing the people in Corinth in his epistle, he's simply referring that these are people that are just still immature, and they'll basically just believe whatever comes their way without having to understand the spirit or being mature. That there's, as he says in verse 2, they've been fed milk, referring to that they've been taught the basic gospel message, not anything too deep into theological, systematic theology. And even then, he says that even though they just had that, they're still not ready to upgrade and be mature. So that's basically the main context there. Okay. Is that he's playing off of the fact that they're still a little immature in the faith, and he's trying to correct them and rebuke them for the fact that they've simply just been listening to whatever blind leaders have been teaching them, just listening only to the cults that have been trying to influence them to their own ways.
Okay, if there are passages where Paul promotes critical thinking, the latter half of chapter 3 of 1 Corinthians seems to directly contradict that to me.
Well, it can be contradictory to you, but as far as if you take the whole context of what the background of the 1 Corinthians epistle goes, as well as the surrounding passages, which I went into with verses 2, and then starting in verse 16 going all the way down, we see where we start what the theme is. And in fact, that's why the whole thing that's being addressed as the wisdom of this world is basically those who are definitely in authority, because the word there for definitely cosmos has a whole lot of definitions. In fact, as far as my Thayer's Greek lexicon that I have on the shelf indicates, that word cosmos has like 8 different definitions depending on the context that's being used. While it can refer to simply just the general totality of the world in general, one of the main things that's used is for those of authority figures. And for that, he's referring to specifically those who proclaim authority. Don't just simply let these authority figures tell you what to believe and just simply accept it, because then he even puts himself on that pedestal. He says, rather Paul, or Apollos, or Cephas, which is referring to Peter, so another one of the 12 disciples, or the world, or life, or death, or things present, or things to come, all are yours, and ye are Christ's, and Christ is God's. So he's basically telling them to not just simply blindly accept them. In fact, Paul even congratulates them. I forget exactly what the verse is, but he says that he congratulates the Bereans for examining what he has said by going to the Old Testament scriptures. It's like he's preaching this message, and he's just glad that they don't just simply take what he says, that they have to go to the Old Testament scriptures to see if what he says is in conformity with what they believed as Jews.
So don't just blindly accept what other people tell you, but go ahead and blindly accept what God tells you.
Well, I mean, if we're going to go by that kind of standard, I mean, we can then just go with any other kinds of things that we're seeing, rather it be in regards to history or science. Mostly history, though, because science doesn't deal within the realm of simply looking at specific texts and such as to whether or not if a certain thing has happened or not. Like you have a lot of the the Holocaust deniers. They say you believe it just because those people tell you to. You have to be critical thinkers to examine that there's contradictory tolls of the deaths, and they try to use that as a means of that they're not telling you the truth, that there's supposed to be some actual evidence that there's no Holocaust and any of that. So you have those kinds of people, if we want to go to that form of being critical thinkers, which can just be more finding paranoid details about every specific individual thing, as long as we're taking in the context of something from rather historical or textual or internal, then we can understand what people like Paul are saying in this passage.
Well, you can do that And if you apply that same sort of thinking to practically any area of life, then you would be well justified in doing that. But since we are not talking about those things, you are committing a equivocation fallacy. Meaning, even if those things are true, has nothing to do with the discussion at hand.
Okay, so then we're just going to trade standards for how we do things compared to different ways?
No, you're making an equivocation fallacy because I'm not talking about things like science and history. I'm talking about these particular passages here.
But would you use that same kind of criticism and standard towards the other things that we talked about?
Yes, I would.
Okay, and that's all I'm trying to say is if we're going to then do that to the New Testament, then you have to do that to everything else. You can't just cherry pick how you apply your standards.
Okay, I agree with that, but those things still have nothing to do with the discussion at hand.
Mm-hmm. And so I've just simply explained why that if we're just simply examining these things and just, what you call blindly accepting what God says, then to me, it would make sense to do that because then it would also make sense to do the same kind of thing with history and the same kind of thing with science. So I'm trying to simply have a consistent take on reality. And I think that especially in regards to the Bible, I can do the same way I have applied it with understanding history, and I can do it the same way that I've applied it in understanding science.
Okay, great. The passages still seem to indicate don't listen blindly to those guys, but listen blindly to God.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the Greek lexicon earlier. Do you know what the Greek word for fool is?
The Greek word for fool?
I know it already.
All right, then go ahead.
It's moros.
Okay.
Which, depending on how it's used, is almost always stupid, dull, foolish, practically brain dead. So that also pretty much sounds like don't think for yourself. Be an idiot and listen to what God says.
No.
So it says let him. So it says let him become. So let me ask you this then. It says let him become a fool that he may be wise. Was the word for wise there?
What is the word for wise? Tell me.
Would be sophos.
Which means?
Well, let me get the lexicon for you.
Let's see.
Yeah, you wanted to say something, Hunter, while I get this going? Trying to get the definition up.
Yeah, can you give me that definition again? Because I actually saw, I think I had a disagreement with with how you put that. I think you kind of jumped the gun on it.
I have it right here on the lexicon.
Yeah, can you give me that again?
The Greek word for foolish is moros, which means dull, stupid, foolish, and it goes on to say flat, which means without an edge.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that. Figuratively, mentally inert, dull in understanding, nonsensical, lacking a grip on reality, acting as though brainless.
Right. Okay. What I'm wondering.
Can't disagree with that if that's the Greek word for it and that's the word they used.
Okay, so wait, hold on. Does the lexicon you use for that come from the Helps Word Studies?
No.
Well, that's exactly what I'm looking at and what I see some of the words you're using. What lexicon are you using?
I just pulled up the first one that came up here.
Does it say a title on it?
Here, I'm posting it right now.
Okay.
And it's a website I don't even like. So.
Okay. So lapping it. So let me see if I repeat the word. Properly dull, flat, understanding, nonsensical, lapping a grip on reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's from Helps Word Studies. Yeah. Which is what I asked for earlier if it was from that.
Well, I'm not looking at this word.
Well, it has the title like literally above it. Helps Word Studies.
Where? I don't see it.
Oh, let me pull up the thing on here so that way I can show it to everybody.
It looks, from what I'm seeing here, it says that they got this information from Thayer's Greek lexicon.
Helps Word Studies. No, I don't see that on there either. It says copyright 1987, 2011 by Helps Ministries,
Oh,
Inc.
now I see it. Now I see it. Now I see it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the Thayers is down here, though. On the accent, Weiner's grammar, foolish, and then with this in reference to Matthew 23:17, which means it actually shows the which verse refers to the specific context in mind. An act or appointment of God deemed foolish by men, 1 Corinthians 25. Equivalent to without learning or erudition, imprudent, without forethought or wisdom. See above. Equivalent to empty, useless, which the useless and the empty goes only in application to 2 Timothy 2:23 and Titus 3:9. In imitation of the Hebrew, referring to when it uses it in the Old Testament, Psalm 13:1, Job 2:10, equivalent to impious, godless, because such a man neglects and despises what relates to salvation. So, in other words, the foolish in regards to the knowledge of salvation of Matthew 5:22. Some take the word here as a Hebrew term, which the Hebrew equivalent would be rebel, expressive of condemnation, Numbers 20:10, Psalm 68:8. See the Syriac, field otion nov, at the passage, and gives all the other different rabbinical writings for these, uses in Old Testament passages.
Okay.
Right.
All in all, it's basically stupid.
The context in which the definition is defined is equivalent to without learning or erudition. So those who are unlearned, that is the context in which this one is being implied.
Is it now?
Well, that's apparently what the scholars for Thayer's Greek lexicon have said. And this is just the basic one. I'm pretty sure the updated one that I have of Thayer's on my shelf will agree in definitely much more detail on this.
Let me see here. Yeah, according to the Thayers that I'm seeing on the same website, it says imprudent without forethought or wisdom, meaning stupid.
Yeah, but what's the verse that uses for it?
1 Corinthians.
Which verse?
127. Then 3:18. And
no, I don't.
4:10.
It says equivalent to without learning or erudition when it comes to that.
That's 1 Corinthians 1:25.
No, that is not.
Then you're reading wrong.
How have you used a Thayer's Greek lexicon before?
I'm looking at the information that's on the screen, dude.
Yes,
1 Corinthians 1:27, 1 Corinthians 3:18, 1 Corinthians 4:10, imprudence without forethought or wisdom.
Mm-hmm. The way it works is that the definition before, and then when they go to the verses, that's the context in which the verses are being the definition for the definition. In other words, where the application goes. So when it comes to imprudent without forethought or wisdom, that context goes for Matthew 7, verse 26, Matthew 23, verse 17 and verse 19, as well as Matthew 25, 2f and 8.
Okay, fine. Let's go with your idea then. Equivalent to without learning or erudition. That still means stupid.
No, it just simply means that they are unlearned. And the issue in the context is what I've explained earlier, that would make sense if we read the second verse of that chapter, which says that I have fed you with milk and not with meat or solid foods, for hitherto ye will not be able to bear it, neither yet now are ye able to bear it. But in modern terms, as Holman Christian Standard translates it, I gave you milk to drink, not solid food, because you were not ready for it. And in fact, you are still not ready. In other words, you are not mature enough to understand some of these other things. You just now have the basic, simple gospel message, and you are not ready to grasp some of these harder theological concepts about the spirituality that you have as a person who is a spiritual person in the body of Christ, and that your body is a temple for God. So he's basically pointing out that they are still immature, and he points out with that the immaturity in the fact that they are without learning or knowledge of a specific thing. And that makes sense because he says because they are still immature, they are not ready for solid food or the whole full theology. Okay, and that is the thing they are without in knowledge.
That's not what 3:18 says.
You have to read 318 in light of the entire context.
Okay, I've read the entire context. You've read the entire context on here. Specifically in 318, it says to become a fool, not you already a fool.
All right.
Meaning you have to become unlearned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To be, in order to be wise, which I'm looking at it now means to be skilled or clever, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how do you do that? By letting God tell you, not critical thinking.
Not really, because he's basically saying that the issues about the things that God tells you says that they weren't ready for, because then you would have to say that it makes no sense at that point. Because he's saying that the things that are the meat is from God as well. So he's basically, so if it's saying just to blindly accept whatever God says, they can't accept the majority of what some of God's saying. He's only telling them the basic gospel, and that's the only knowledge that they are able to still comprehend at that point because of their immaturity in the body.
Okay, but the verse says to become a fool.
Okay, are you going to...
I mean, I don't know how you could possibly spin it. It says to become unlearned.
I'm not trying to spin anything. I'm allowing the entirety of a context and background.
You've read the entirety context on here. I've read the entirety context in here. Okay, we both know the entirety of the context, and it still says become unlearned.
Yes, and you can say that for almost anything else, and if you ignore context, you're then going to come to whatever conclusions you got. Like you can just remove context where some guy says, I love dogs, I'm attracted to them. It's like, oh, this guy just, likes dogs, when it's a straw argument that he's proposing towards certain people that are trying to have some weird sense of morality. He doesn't personally believe these things. He's simply repeating what his opponents believe. So if we ignore that context, then we could just say that this person likes dogs.
Okay,
we can do that for any written type of work in antiquity.
Where in chapter 3 does it say anything about you're not ready?
In verse 2, I gave you milk to drink, not solid food, because you were not yet ready for it. In fact, you are still not ready.
Okay, and how does that translate into becoming unlearned? How are you already unlearned and then become unlearned?
And that's why I focused on then verse 16. Don't you yourselves know that you are God's sanctuary and that the Spirit of God lives in you? If anyone destroys God's sanctuary, God will destroy him, for God's sanctuary is holy, and that is what you are. No one should deceive himself. If anyone among you thinks he is wise in this age, he must become foolish so that he can become wise.
Okay, so you are unready and unlearned. Now you have to become unlearned.
To become foolish.
It's great. You're unlearned. You're not ready. So you have to become not learned.
Yeah, because they say, because the key word is, if anyone among you thinks he is wise in this age, referring that they are indeed not wise at all, that they must become foolish, must acknowledge and recognize themselves as foolish, and at that point, they can then start to become wise.
Okay, they have to become dull.
Basically they have to admit that that is what they are at this point, due to the fact that, as Paul said, you are not ready yet. And these are people that he says are claiming to think that they are wise. But in reality, they are still immature. They're still unlearned. And therefore, he says that they must become it, meaning by profession, they have to definitely acknowledge themselves as such. And that is the first step to becoming wise, as probably a saying you're familiar with, though it might be a bad analogy, is that, what is it? Denial is the first step in acceptance or something like that. There's always a step in something in going to a sort of growing and a maturing to a specific position. So to being wise in the faith, to being more mature in the faith, you have to at least acknowledge that you are foolish instead of being simply just in this denial process, that you are wise even in reality when you're not, on the issues of the spiritual things. Because that's the other context too, is not just simply being foolish or wise in the whole totality of science and mathematics and such. Because even then, that wasn't really exactly as advanced as what we have now. He's referring to the context of, these are the other cults that are surrounding you with false teachings, and there's false teachers being allowed in the church that are leading you away. And you cannot do that. And he points out that the fact that they're immature, they're allowing it to happen, and that in order to solve a problem, no one should deceive himself. Again, that's the point. Don't lie about yourself. So if you think that you're wise, even though you're foolish, you must become foolish. In other words, acknowledge that you are foolish so that then you can become wise. That way you can live in the reality and grow and learn from it, so that way you then become wise.
Okay, so you have to become stupid to be wise, yes? Yes. We agreed on it earlier. I see how you would change your mind.
I don't see how you were... I don't understand how you didn't catch what I just said.
No, I caught what you said.
No, apparently not, because it's not literally becoming stupid. He's saying, well, listen to this.
No, I know it's not literally stupid. It's figurative.
No. It's the issue that he's not even saying just simply becoming, because the verse itself says, no one should deceive himself, saying, stop lying about who you are. If any one of you thinks he is wise in the age, meaning, oh, I know exactly what the truth is about God and all these other things. I'm believing what these false teachers are saying, and it's wise for me to do so. That's a foolish thing, to just accept the blind, foolish teachers that are leading them down the path of destruction. So he basically says, okay, if you think you're wise, then become foolish so that he can become wise. So he's trying to reach to an ignorant age that claims that they're wise, and says, all right, just become foolish, trying to talk through denialist language, because they won't admit that they're foolish. And he's saying, become foolish then, so that you can become wise. So either way, rather the person acknowledges that they are fools, they understand what he's saying, and those who think they're wise but they're fools, they will try to probably go with what he's saying, so that either way they could still become wise and learn to discern and rebuke and turn away from these false prophets and these false teachers that have been creeping into the church, which is why that part of the context is indicated when 21 says, so no one should boast in human leaders, for everything is yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or things present or things to come, everything is yours. So that is the point, is that he's not saying that wise people just simply become foolish. He's using language to counteract with those who are already foolish, trying to play with them at their own game.
Oh man, if you say so, mate.
No, it's like trying to get a child to, needs to get a bath or something like that, but doesn't want to, but is so focused and obsessed with a game that he's wanting to play. You play within the role of the game and get something where you can create something that causes him to eventually go to the bathtub and think it's part of the game or something like that. I have a nephew. Sometimes my stepmom has to do this just in order to get him there. The same kind of way we're seeing with Paul trying to reach out to the deceived and foolish Corinthians that are at the church.
Okay, is he appealing to their critical thinking at all?
Is he appealing to the critical thinking at all? I would believe so, yes.
Be more specific.
Yes. I believe he is.
Is he appealing to their critical thinking by demonstrating how they are false prophets and how they should listen to him?
No, he's not talking to false prophets, but people that have been deceived by the false prophets.
Yes, I understand that. Is he demonstrating to them how these other people are false prophets?
I'm pretty sure elsewhere in the text, yeah, he does. The whole chapter itself is in dedication to refuting their claims and such.
How does he do so?
Well, let's go to one instance. I'm just going this as a random, but the whole point is just looking at the entire epistles and the random chapters. You can do this simply just by opening up any chapter and trying to examine just the chapter. You don't have to go to the other ones if you don't want to. You just take one and see just simple instances where he's pointing out specific issues and trying to address them to the church. So in verse 5, the section I have highlighted is that it's talking about immoral church members. It is widely reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and the kind of sexual immorality that is not even tolerated among the Gentiles. A man is living with his father's wife, and you are inflated with pride instead of filled with grief, so that he who has committed this act might be removed from your congregation. For though I am absent in body, but present in spirit, I have already decided about the one who has done this thing, as though I were present. When you are assembled in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, with my spirit and with the power of our Lord Jesus, turn that one over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, so that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. Your boasting is not good. Don't you know that a little yeast permeates the whole batch of dough? Clean out the old yeast so that you may be a new batch. You are indeed unleavened, for Christ, our Passover, has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us observe the feast not with old yeast, or with the yeast of malice and evil, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So that is verses 1 through 8 of that particular chapter, and is addressing the issue of those who are definitely in the sexual immorality people. Now, he goes on more, but I don't know if you want to keep going onward with specifically the church discipline that he provides on that, if you want to just deal with what I've read.
I'll just deal with what you read. So, well, it kind of really doesn't matter either way, because my question is going to be the same. How do they know then that he's not a false prophet? Because as far as they know, he's just saying these things, right?
Right, and that's why he has said what he said in 1 Corinthians 3:18, not just to simply be blind and believing what he says. And trying to remember that's Acts 17:11 actually that I remembered now, is the passage where he commemorates the Bereans, because as it says, as soon as it was night, the brothers sent Paul and Silas off to Berea. On the arrival, they went into the synagogue of the Jews. The people here were more open-minded than those in Thessalonica, since they welcomed the message with eagerness and examined the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. So Paul basically has, well, not specifically Paul, Luke is the author in this particular one, but this is after Paul has gone to there and that they accepted him. Luke notes that these people were basically wise and open-minded because that they in Thessalonica welcomed the message with, or no, not the Thessalonians, the Bereans, sorry. The Bereans were more open-minded because they welcomed the message with eagerness, and they examined the scriptures daily, every day, to see if what he was saying, these things were so. What he was saying was true. And then verse 12 says, consequently, many of them believed, including a number of the prominent Greek women as well as men. So it happened after they decided to examine the scriptures, which they would have to see if what he was saying was actually true. So they were being applauded as open-minded, as wise, because they not only accepted the message with eagerness, but because they also had examined the scriptures to see whether or not if they spoke truth.
Okay, would you say the same thing if they were open-minded and foolish, quote unquote, but still disagreed with him?
I'm sure that anyone has small disagreements with him. That's why.
That's not what I asked. I asked if he would say the same thing. If he would still applaud them.
That they were open-minded. As long as they weren't making things a salvific issue, like he mentions in the same epistle in 1 Corinthians. I believe it's in chapter 10. No, it's in verse 8, or chapter 8, actually, when he talks about the food offered to the idols. I went over this earlier. But be careful that, so he basically says, foods will not make us acceptable to God. We are not inferior if we don't eat, and we are not better if we do eat. Saying it doesn't matter whether you eat meat that's been offered to idols. But be careful that this right, your liberty of yours, it becomes a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone sees you, the one who has this knowledge, dining in an idol's temple, won't his weak conscience be encouraged to eat food offered to idols? Then the weak person, the brother for whom Christ died, is ruined by your knowledge. Now when you sin like this against the brothers and wound their weak conscience, you are sinning against Christ. Therefore, if food causes my brother to fall, I will never again eat meat, so that I won't cause my brother to fall. and then Romans 14, which plays upon the same message that is being focused on there, focusing on the concepts of liberty. Anyone who is weak in the faith, don't argue about doubtful issues. One person believes he may eat anything, but one who is weak eats only vegetables. One who eats must not look down on one who does not eat, and one who does not eat must not criticize who does, because God has accepted them. So he says, as long as you don't make it a salvific issue and you don't knowingly do something in front of someone that can stumble somebody, like, for example, if a friend of yours is uncomfortable with a certain movie that you and a bunch of your other friends decide to watch, definitely a better thing to try to find something else that y'all all can like for the sake of your friend. So likewise, for the sake of walking in the faith, for food wise, if someone feels it's wrong to eat this specific meat, or it's wrong for them, then don't eat that in front of them, and don't do that kind of stuff. So again, another form of critical thinking, trying to be wary of how other people feel about their walk, and they're accepted to be either vegetarians, Torah dietarian keepers, or Gentiles that will eat whatever they are allowed to eat, just as long as it's not considered a salvific issue. Paul will accept them. It's only those who make it a salvific issue that he condemns.
So it's okay to disagree with him as long as you've done your own critical thinking, as long as you don't make it an issue, but you're still weak.
Right. The issue about the weak Christian is those who have just converted to the faith. That's usually the language that's been used when it refers to in Romans 14 and 1 Corinthians 10 as the weak Christian. Someone who is just new to the faith, is gentle, and doesn't have as much knowledge at that point. So when someone is doing something that causes them to sin and to turn to other things, but just simply things that disagree with that they're uneasy with, that's a sin then to knowingly, this will cause someone to have a negative reaction in their faith, and you knowingly do this, then you by chance are sinning, because you're basically trying to be a cause for the person to turn away from the faith at that point. So yeah, there's critical thinking that's involved there to avoid trying to be in an unreasonable confrontation with certain people.
Okay. So it's okay to disagree, but going back to chapter 3, 16 through 17, where he talks about that you are a temple of God, and that if any man defile that temple, that man will be destroyed by God. I'm paraphrasing. So it's okay to disagree with me, but God's going to destroy you.
Are you referring to 1 Corinthians 8?
3.
What is he saying to destroy?
16, 17.
16, 17. Yes. The issue is, don't you know yourselves that you are God's sanctuary, and that the Spirit of the God lives in you? If anyone destroys God's sanctuary, God will destroy him, for God's sanctuary is holy, and that is what you are. Again, yes, it's referring to the people that are trying to make it a salvific issue, such as the Judaizers, who would say, you need to follow the dietarian laws of the Torah in order to be saved. And this was something that the Apostle Paul had taught against, that you as a Christian have the liberty, whether Jew or Gentile, to follow whatever practices you want. Rather, you want to stick to somewhat of a Jewish leaning while still accepting New Testament formulations, or you want to be a Gentile and have the liberty to eat whatever you want concerning food. But those who make it a salvific issue and eventually causes the person or to stumble in the faith and convert away, he says, yes, God will destroy him, meaning that the person is an unsaved false prophet or something like that. Basically, this person is trying to lead people away from the faith rather than to strengthen and build up those who are in the faith.
Okay, so it's so he's instilling that guilt, not so much fear, that guilt in there, where you can disagree with me if you want, but those people who helped you to disagree with me are going to get destroyed.
It's not simply a disagreement issue. It's just simply the consensus of what the entirety of the church has always affirmed, and that these are simply new people that are coming along the scenes, causing these different divisions and such.
So if these people do their own critical thinking, not the false prophets. If the people do their own critical thinking and still believe the false prophets, those false prophets will be destroyed.
Well, they
So
haven't
it's
done
instilling
the
that
critical
guilt.
thinking.
Well, okay, so if you disagree and agree with the false prophets, even though you've done your own critical thinking, then they haven't done any critical thinking.
Well, no, because the most people that are being referred to by this kind of concept, especially if we go to the food dietary laws and such, these are people that cling to traditions blindly rather than accepting concepts such as what the New Testament in its full entirety would say. They're just obsessed with the traditions of the dietary laws and are so obsessed that they believe everybody should be aligned with it. This is the same kind of concepts we see in Judaizers and Hebrew Israelite cults and other groups that have a hard insistence that we need to still observe Torah.
Okay, so
It's mostly because of tradition.
A single person does his own critical thinking.
Uh-huh.
He considered all the information that he has in front of him, disagrees with Paul, and ends up agreeing with the false prophets, quote unquote.
Uh-huh.
Right? And you're saying there's no critical thinking there.
Okay. When you word it like that, there is critical thinking, and that person can still be judged. Yes.
Different. I didn't word it much different.
Well, then I probably misunderstood, and I apologize for that. But point being that just because one does apply critical thinking doesn't automatically nullify or dull out that the other person has likewise done critical thinking, has agreed with Paul.
Okay, so you can do critical thinking, disagree with Paul, and agree with the false prophets, and you won't get that applause then.
No, you won't get the applause because the critical thinking you applied came to a wrong error and conclusion, just like someone can use critical thinking, but the critical thinking led them to believe that the earth is 6,000 years old, and that is not what the age of the earth is.
Okay, a few moments ago you said it's not a problem as long as they don't start an issue with it.
Right, because I'm referring specifically to the issue about the dietary laws and such.
Okay, we're not even talking about dietary laws. We're talking about believing one side or the other.
Uh-huh.
So you're going to have to make up your mind here somewhere.
Well, I believe I've made my mind clearly.
Okay, a moment ago you said it's not a problem as long as they don't cause an issue, and now you're saying it is a problem.
Because I was talking about those who were involved in the dietary laws, which is why I went over to 1 Corinthians 8 and Romans 14 about that.
So critical thinking can only be applauded if you end up agreeing with Paul. That's not critical thinking. That's
not just simply just agreeing with Paul. Like I said, other people have the ability to critical think, but they come to different conclusions as well.
Okay, so if you critical think and disagree with Paul and agree with the false prophets, either you or the false prophets, depending on where you fucking read, are going to get judged and destroyed by God. That's not promoting critical thinking.
How is that not promoting?
Because when you're saying that when they use critical thinking, they assess all the information that they have in front of them by themselves, for themselves, and end up disagreeing with Paul and agreeing with the false prophets, they're either instilled with fear or guilt, because either they will be destroyed or these false prophets will be destroyed, which would lead to the guilt. Okay, that's not promoting critical thinking. That's promoting fascist thinking.
Okay, and that seems to be your thought on that, because I can see that kind of standard can be applied to any other kind of thing that someone else can make, such as
talking about other things that people can make.
But then you're being inconsistent if you're not going to allow
I agree.
To be applied elsewhere.
That standard should be applied everywhere, but that we're not talking about anywhere else, but right here. We're talking about.
Right, and I'm saying that's why you're understanding that. Well, because of that, then automatically must not mean critical thinking. It means fascist.
If they're instilled with fear or guilt as a result of where their mind lies at the end of it, that's not promoting critical thinking. That's saying you can think for yourself, you can decide for yourself, but if you disagree with me, you're going to get killed.
Okay, what about the idea of if someone tries to prove the Earth is 6,000 years old using funds from a group, and this person has done this and is threatened that if he doesn't stop, he will be fired from his job as a scientist?
Nobody should ever be threatened like that. I told you already.
There are people that have gone through that when they've tried to go through their ideas of trying to publish scientific papers that they believe affirms young Earth creationism, that they found scientific evidence that proves such, or intelligent design to find something proves intelligent design through scientific papers, but yet they get fired from their job as such because for the intelligent design guy, he done his research in critical thinking and made a paper and wanted it published, but at the peer review stage, it failed, and he was not allowed to publish it. If it did, he would be fired from his job. Been told this, publishes it anyways, and ends up getting fired. But doesn't the threat of getting fired from the job because you have gone through the process of peer review, and if you do something like this, even though the person technically did critical thinking about it, but as being said, if you do this, you're going to be fired. Isn't that the same kind of fear thing that the
Christian,
young Earth creationists advocate?
I already said right before you started going on about that the standard I'm applying here I should apply to everything else in the universe. Nobody should ever be instilled with fear, guilt, intimidation, etc., to think one way or the other. Now, if you're telling me that he's saying you can think for yourself, you can use critical thinking, but if you disagree with me, you're going to be damned forever. That's instilling fear. That's intimidation. That is not instilling critical thinking.
And I disagree.
That's giving
just
the
like
illusion of critical thinking. And if you disagree, then how immoral can you be? You're allowing the verse to say that if you disagree with me, you're going to be damned forever. That's not instilling critical thinking. That's intimidating someone to make a decision.
And how immoral is it for the scientist to have kicked an intelligent design advocate out, even though he did break the rules regarding peer review scholarship and such? And being a scientist, I
completely agree with you. That should never happen. I
disagree with you there. That he should have been fired for
because he's pursuing something he thinks is right.
Is it right though? That's the point. He's trying to put out a scientific paper, and there's rules that are established. There are people that have been in this community for a while that have looked at this incident, and they are in agreement with me. This guy should have been fired because he broke the rules, and he was not following what it means to be a scientist, what it meant to get something peer reviewed.
If he didn't get it peer reviewed, then of course he has no control whether or not his paper gets published. But
he got it peer reviewed, and they said it doesn't pass the qualification, so it should not be published. And if you publish it, this should be everyone's common sense rule if you're in this field, is that you will get fired if you try to get this published and try to pass it off if it's some sort of peer-reviewed paper.
And I disagree with anybody who would fire that person.
Huh?
He's promoting something he thinks is true. Whether he's right or wrong, he's promoting something he thinks is true. And they're suppressing his information.
Yeah, because the issue of it was trying to be a peer-reviewed paper. You know how that works.
Yes, I know how that works. If something isn't peer-reviewed properly, then it doesn't get published. I understand. That's not the problem I'm having here. If it's not peer-reviewed and they don't want to publish it in their paper, that's fine. If he wants to go publish it somewhere else, then he should not be fired for that.
Right. And the problem is that he is trying to pass it off as it is peer-reviewed, as if the people did review it and approve of it. He basically tried to lie about it.
Then let them come out against him, not fire him.
I mean, are we going to have to just change the laws of how these things work?
Yeah, laws change every day.
My goodness. Okay.
Just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean you have the right to fire them. When you use fear, intimidation, or guilt to get somebody to think the way you are thinking, then that is not critical thinking.
All right. Well,
you have to allow people to come to their own conclusions. Mm-hmm. And if they're wrong, you can disagree with them all you want. You can argue with them about it all you want. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean, why would you even think about threatening them with violence or internal damnation or intimidate them in any way?
Because there's a penalty for anything. And for some people,
there's a penalty for thinking. We have thought crime now.
No, the issue is not simply about a thinking, but the act. The very idea of what they were doing in 1 Corinthians was that the thoughts led to actions, one of which was sexual immorality, as 1 Corinthians 5 had demonstrated, that there is an immorality going on. There's actions that have been done, some of which with 1 Corinthians had led to the influence of the cult prostitute practice, that these shrine cult prostitutes would come in, lure people, and they were implying this practice into the church, mixing in, doing some kind of a what's the term? Basically, like the different religions mingled together and having a kumbaya, even though these shrine cult prostitutes, one of their main practices was leading people into these different areas for worship, which involved sacrificing little children. And as the baby burnt, then all of a sudden they start engaging in sexual activities while administering drugs through enemas and castrating themselves. So that's just one of the actions that the Church of Corinth was getting itself involved with.
Okay, great. Then you do what you can to stop those actions. But that's we're not talking about the individual here, are we now? Because I'm talking about the individual. When you threaten an individual with eternal damnation because they think differently than you do, that's not critical thinking.
Then why do we have police? Why do we have law? Why do we have judges?
Not thinking.
These people have thought before they came to their conclusions and their actions.
Great. A lot of people think and don't come to the same actions. A lot of people think the
Exactly.
same way and don't come to the same actions. There are racists in this country who disagree with what happened in Charlottesville. And that has nothing to do with anything. Just because somebody disagrees with the way you think doesn't mean you threaten them with eternal damnation. Because just like everything, it's an individual case. Not everybody who thinks the same way are going to do the same things. When you think like that, that's how things like profiling happens. When you use intimidation, threats, fear, guilt, you are not promoting critical thinking. You are threatening them in order to help them decide to think like you do.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember correctly, if you've read a history book, that same philosophy that Paul is using in chapter 3 there was used by the Nazis in Germany. That's exactly how that whole mess started.
And people have made the same accusations about President Obama and George Bush.
Okay, at least with, I don't know about George Bush, but at least with Hitler.
Have you heard of
kind
Holocaust deniers and 9/11 conspiracy theorists?
Yes, I have.
That's what they'll say, is that because
great, but with
Bush said that they believe that
Nazi Germany, that's something we can actually prove.
Well, according to some people, they think that the evidence is more in their favor.
Okay, but
that doesn't happen. I'm literally appalled by this, that we're even having this conversation about these topics.
I'm honestly appalled that you can excuse threats of violence and intimidation as a form of promoting critical thinking.
What you would define as such in secular terms of what we've tried going over, especially in regards to the issue of the scientist analogy, a lot of atheists I know would definitely be in a disagreement with you. And these are people that are, some of them are scientists themselves, or people that are going for a degree in science.
I don't care what other atheists say. I don't represent other atheists.
Right. So if you don't care about what they say, also, then why should I care about what you're having to say about this? We're having a disagreement.
I don't care what they have to say. I want to hear what they have to say, but they don't represent me. You're talking to me, not them.
Exactly. I'm not talking about a
representation.
I'm not talking about a representation.
Then don't tell me, oh, there's a lot of atheists that would disagree with you, because they have nothing to do with the conversation you and I are having with each other.
My point is,
if they want to confront me on disagreeing with me, then let them.
That's the point, is that there's disagreement, just like we're having a disagreement. So what is ultimately the end goal if it's just us having a disagreement over things of what you and I define as? You think something is immoral. Apparently, we have different perspectives. Some people think that I'm going from certain perspectives I'm sure you might be familiar with, that, being transgendered is immoral, that getting a sex change is immoral. Would you agree with that?
Me personally, no.
Right. But there are some people that think it's like the next level of fat shaming is like, oh, this person's not too good the way they look, so let's change themselves. That's one way someone goes about it, and they're trying to use critical thinking for that. But again, you have a different interpretation of how things are moral or immoral, just like I have a different definition of how things are moral and immoral. That's because we're coming at different standards. Not only is this way for the atheist or the agnostic, that they have different standards and their different philosophies and worldviews, but likewise, between you and me, I'm a Christian coming from the biblical worldview, and the issue is about whether or not something is consistent in our understanding. I don't think what you're applying is a consistent take.
You're using equivocation fallacy again, because now you're talking about people changing their bodies based on their own critical thinking. We're not talking about them being intimidated into changing their body.
My point is that you're trying to say that something is immoral. And I'm saying that it's because we have different standards, definitions, and this can be applied to literally any single thing from anyone with any kind of philosophy.
I'm not just saying something is immoral. I'm giving you a reason why it's immoral.
Right. A reason based upon your philosophy and worldview. And I have my reasons why I disagree with you based on
but you
my
haven't
worldview.
Given me a reason. You just say it's not.
I'm telling you that the reason why it is not is because that it's simply that if we do this, then we can't make sense of anything in this world. That if we're going to do that, then you yourself are going to have to contradict some of your own ideas and beliefs. If what you're saying is true.
By promoting critical thinking without intimidation or fear or guilt or any of that stuff, we all of a sudden have no way to make sense of anything in the world? Are you kidding me?
You're going to have to eventually put it to some point when someone is out there thinking that the logical solution to what the growth rate of the states and that the amount of homeless people being put out is that, oh, well, there's too much people living in these different houses and there's too much babies growing up. And because of that, there's no room for some of these homeless people. So to fix the solution, either this person decides the only solutions is to kill the homeless or to kill those who live in the rich houses.
Okay,
and
great.
What is the penalty for that?
If they just go out and do it, of course they get punished. But now you're talking
by what?
Between action.
By what?
No, you're talking a difference between action and thinking. I'm talking about thinking.
Yeah, and it's not simply the thinking that is getting punished in the case of the passage you mentioned. It's the actions, because the thoughts led to the actions, and that is what they get judged for.
Okay, so it is not clear on that in that verse.
I read it and it kind of was, because it says, don't you know yourselves that you are God's sanctuary and that the Spirit of God lives in you? If anyone destroys God's sanctuary, God will destroy him, for God's sanctuary is holy. And what is that which you are? And I pulled up 2 chapters, Romans 14, 1 Corinthians 8, where the example was about the dietary laws. If someone looks and sees, that guy is weak in the faith. He thinks that if something is about to happen.
Are you telling me that you were only talking about punishments for actions this entire time when over and over again I have said for thinking only?
Yeah, because you mentioned a verse that only applies in that context.
I'm out. You're not even paying attention to the conversation.
I am, but you are going to something that applies in context.
Over and over again, I said for thinking, and now you're telling me that this entire time you were talking about actions.
Well, then go to a verse that actually applies to it. No,
it doesn't work like that. I'm done with the conversation.
Well, you went to something with a different context, sir.
No, this entire time I was talking about thinking and critical thinking only. You're talking about actions all of a sudden.
Then try to stick with it.
Can I ask a question, though?
Try to stick with it. I stuck with critical thinking this entire time, Christian. Now you're being dishonest. I have said
when you talked about verse 16 and 17, that doesn't automatically limit itself to thought actions.
I didn't say it automatically limited itself to thought actions.
Then what verse did you say wasn't clear, and rather it was?
No, I'm saying that 16 and 17 are not clear to saying just actions.
No, because the issue is that you take it as both of the concepts. It's referring to the actions, because how else do you destroy God's sanctuary? By sin. How do you sin? By action.
Are you fucking kidding me?
What is sin? Violating God's law.
According to this whole chapter, they're sinning by disagreeing.
Hey, can I ask something, though?
Sure.
I missed the middle of this conversation, but we were originally the verse that got brought up was talking about how the those who are foolish will become wise, and those that are wise will become foolish. Pin?
I'm sorry, say that again. You're a little muffled.
Hang on. I probably have to put in my headphones. But the verse that was brought up earlier was those who are wise will become fools. Is that what the verse said? And those who are foolish will become wise.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, I've actually like kind of looked into that myself. You do understand that at the time period of like that all going on, Christians were considered foolish. I mean, of course, you know that, right? About like the consider about the Jews to the Romans and everything.
Okay, pretty much every religion thought everybody was foolish other than them at the time.
But
Even
for real
today,
though,
pretty much every religion thinks everybody who's not in that religion is foolish. I mean, it's,
yeah, but no. Okay, so you can't really say that in a sense that how the Christians were considered foolish because according to the Jews and to the Romans of the time, the dumbest thing they could ever have said is that their God was crucified. I don't know if you ever heard of the Alexamos Prophetos. I think it's what it's called.
I don't know what that is, and I kind of don't care.
Well, it goes along with showing how just foolish literally the Jews and the Roman citizens of the time thought literally the Christians were like the foolish of the foolish, because of the fact that they thought because you have the crucifixion, which is the Romans, the greatest thing to show embarrassment, and then the Jews also saying that their God died is a complete embarrassment as well. So you have literally the foolish, and you got to think this is also Paul speaking in the book that you quoted. The foolish will become wise in the sense that those who are considered to be foolish are now wise because they are following in truth according to Paul, and those who are considered themselves wise, as CA pointed out earlier, to the world standard, they consider themselves wise, like the philosophers of the time, the pagans who were scholars or political parties of the Caesar and everything. They thought themselves as the wisest people, but since they were not with Christ, they go to being foolish. So in that kind of context, you see, like from a worldview perspective and from a biblical perspective, the foolish is becoming wise, and the wise literally becoming foolish. It's not saying like literally like this is non-critical thinking. So with also First Thessalonians 5:21. CA brought this up earlier. We're actually commanded to use critical thinking to test all things and to hold that to which is good. The only thing that is good is what is truth. So that means whatever that leads us, wherever that takes us, we have to hold to that, despite whether it be scientific, philosophically, spiritual, biblical, or anything in that sort of matter. We have to be no matter what.
Okay, yeah,
And that's just
you're contradicting pretty much everything CA said earlier.
Well, that's my standpoint on it. And
Okay.
when he first started talking, I actually agreed with what he said. He also used First Thessalonians, but he didn't bring up how the foolish were wise and how the wise became foolish. He didn't exactly put it to the way I put it with the Alexamos Prophetos thing, like I did. So
Right.
I don't know what contradicted.
Well, he didn't say because Christians are foolish, you become foolish to be wise because you're converting. He said it's because you're not ready to understand, and that you have to admit that you're not all-knowing and you're not the wisest person on the planet. So when you admit that you're not like that, then you become a fool pretty much automatically, and then as a result, you are a wise person.
Well, okay, so
But hold on. So first you're contradicting what Christian said, which means there's a big problem in your guys' philosophy here because neither you guys apparently don't agree with each other. Secondly, I'm not in any way interested in starting the conversation over.
Well, real quick, what actually
before you do, he actually misrepresented me. That I didn't say in general of being foolish. I affirm that the context was in regards to the spiritual things, because as I pointed out, verse 2, that seems to be the issue, is about the issue about the theology that they were fed, that they had and learned, not simply a knowledge of science and history and biology and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, real quick though, let me just respond to what you said.
I think I said that, but I was paraphrasing. If I didn't, then I'm sorry.
No, but yeah, actually, with what CA said, and even with what you said, that actually still does not contradict what I said, not at all.
I
If-
would disagree because they sound like two completely different things to me.
Okay, if they're two totally different things, does that mean that they have to contradict? They're not the complete opposite of each other. They're just two totally different things.
A contradiction, the way I understand it, is just two things that don't agree with each other.
Right, but both of ours don't have to agree. Or I'm sorry.
That makes it a
both-
contradiction.
Yeah, no. So if A and B are both at odds of each other, they can't be true. But if both A and B can both be true, then they're not a contradiction. What CA said, even with what you said, can still be true along with mine. Because
if A and B say are two completely different things,
Mhm.
and that means they contradict each other.
No, not
They
true.
contradict each other, then neither can be true, or either
Okay.
one can be true.
If I
not
say,
both.
hold on. If I say,
Hey, hold on, Hunter.
No, hang on.
No,
Wait.
I'm just letting you know this is the last word because we got to wrap up and head to
Okay, just
Discord
real
after
quick.
this.
It's not a contradiction because if I said an orange is orange and an apple is green, those are two totally different things. Do they contradict?
Okay, now you're making an equivocation fallacy.
No, I'm not.
Like I did, because now you're talking about two different topics. We're talking about
No.
topic.
I'm doing exactly what you said. You said two totally different things contradict. Those two
No.
are totally
We are
different
talking
things.
about in context of what CA said about it and what you
Yeah.
said about it. We're not
And
talking
they
about
do not
two different
contradict.
topics. We're talking about one topic.
I know,
If
but
A
what you said
if
is that
A
they
says
contradict,
something
and I'm
about a
saying that they
topic,
don't at all.
If A says something about a topic and B says something about a topic, and what they both said is not the same thing, they're different things. That's a contradiction. So
No, it's
either
not.
one of them is right or neither of them are right.
No, you're wrong about that. That's not a contradiction. They can both be right at the same time.
If they're
They
two
are-
different things, either one is right or neither are right. You can't have both because that is a contradiction.
All right. We're gonna have to cut it off there because we ran out. We're like 6 minutes past the time we were supposed to end the hangout. So definitely a very thought-provoking and critical thinking kind of hangout we've had for the Christian Anarchist show. So thank y'all for coming on. We will be doing this possibly next Friday. I don't know if I got something that's going on next week, but hopefully things will be resolved. And don't know, still working on something about a debate being challenged by Marshall Mathers on the issue of who died on the cross. Will take place sometime on October 26th for those who want to tune in on that. But at the moment, we do not have a moderator. So if anyone is interested in moderating, feel free to get in contact with me on Hangouts or the email in the description. So until then, this has been the Christian Anarchist. Shalom Aleichem. Peace be upon you, because I wish that upon you. Have a good day.